I want to give you fair warning. All those here who are idealists in romance, leave now. Because this session will expose you to some brutal facts. Our first speaker, an economist geek, asks the urgent question: is national well-being higher in countries in which men have larger penises than in those in which men are less well endowed? Now, she also informs us about the marriage preferences of shorter men and the earning power of lesbians, among other things. Come on. This is Marina Adshade.
Thank you for having me. So I'm going to take 2 seconds of my time before I start and just to say what a pleasure it's been to meet so many of you over the last couple of days. It's been a delight being here, and I feel like I've met people that I'm going to be seeing for years from now. So thank you very much. What a pleasure. Okay, so one question that I get a lot, I've been getting a lot lately, is this. People ask me, Marina, when did you first become interested in sex? So I'm a not very private person, and I like to be honest, so I'm inclined to give them an honest answer. But when I think about what they're really asking me, which is when did you first become interested in the economics of sex, I realize the answer isn't that different. Now that might sound hard to believe, but when I was in grade 8, a copy of Xavier Hollander's memoir, The Happy Hooker, was making its rounds through my dorm. And so 13-year-old me sat in my English class during quiet reading time, immersed in the fantasy of a New York madam in the 1960s. The Happy Hooker was an awakening for me, not just in the biological sense, but in terms of how I think about human behavior and markets. Not much longer after this, I got into a heated debate with a friend of mine over the legalization of prostitution, in which I argued that anti-prostitution laws were unfair because they penalized low-income women for doing what other women did through marriage, exchanging sex for financial security. Yeah, this is what I talked about when I was 13. Can you imagine what I'm going to talk about now? Anyway, I've changed my view on this in the intervening years, and this is what I'm going to talk about, the idea that all women are sellers of sex. But before I do that, let me tell you how I really got to where I am right now. Having the chance to be here with you, sharing my perspective that every option, every decision, and every outcome in matters of sex and love is better understood through an economics framework. So, I've been teaching for a long time. And it seemed to me there had to be a better way of teaching economic theory to students that really got them engaged in learning the subject. And so I decided that the best thing to do would be to give them a way to apply economic theories to their own personal behavior. And so I started the world's first university-level course on the economics of sex and love. Now you can imagine this was a hugely popular course. The first couple of weeks of term, every time that I taught it, I had students sitting on the stairs coming down into the lecture hall just hoping that eventually space would become available. The first term that I taught it, my colleagues in the economics department warned me. They said, you know, once the students figure out what this course is really about, they're going to lose interest. But since I started the term talking about how sexual services are priced, I guarantee you nobody lost interest. I knew I'd achieved what I set out to do the very first time I taught the course. It was just after Thanksgiving weekend, and the students had been home with their families, and one of my students put up her hand and she asked me a very explicit question, because they love to do that, right? And I was still getting used to talking to large groups of people about very frank matters, and so I responded to her. I said, if I could answer that question, but if I did, I don't think your mother would be very happy with me. And she said, oh, my family talked about nothing but your course all weekend. My mother would love to be able to come with me. Anyway, so there's it probably didn't hurt, I should tell you, that very first term I taught the course, I invited a young woman who was in the process of auctioning off her virginity to the tune of $3.8 million to come and speak to my class about her particular market for sex. The second question that I get asked a lot is this: Marina, don't you think this perspective is just heartless and cold? Do you really want to live in a world in which people use economic principles to choose their intimate partners? The second part of that question is easy to answer. Do I think people should choose their sexual partners using economics? No, absolutely not. But I do think that there's a purpose served by thinking about sex and love from an economist perspective, because it helps us understand the options that we all face and the decisions that we all make. So let me give you an illustration of a market that I think shows my point. It seems like if you're a woman of practically any age, there's somebody there standing ready to say to you, you are a seller on a buyer's market. Lower your price. We hear it from our mothers. You're too picky. We hear it from our friends. All the good men are gone. And we hear it from the world at large. You have waited too long. You've missed your chance. I recently had a prospective suitor use this ever so charming line. He said, "Before you say no, hear me out. I've done the math. And I've calculated that for every available man your age, there are 40 women. 40. Now, if you don't mind me saying, you're not that attractive. And so if you ever hope to find a man, you're going to have to learn to compromise. I think you should give me a chance." This is a terrible pickup line, just in case you're wondering. You are a seller on a buyer's market. Lower your price. Recently, it's become popular to apply very basic understanding of supply and demand to markets for sex and love. And the logic goes something like this. Women are sellers of sex, and men are buyers of sex because men, for some inexplicable reason, like sex more than women. And so women have to be compensated in order to encourage them to have sex with men. And so this is kind of the same kind of understanding that I had when I was younger, and I argued against legalization of prostitution on the grounds that all women are sellers of sex. In this very kind of naive view of the world, if there's people who are single, then it has to be true that the sellers, the women, are setting their prices too high for the services that they're selling. Now, this really simple view of the world, it might be appealing, but it's actually a very poor descriptor of how the market for sex and love actually operates. The true economic story is so much more elegant, and it's so much more enlightening in this very basic understanding of supply and demand. Okay, so to me, the market for sex and love is a lot like a barter economy in which you don't have any money to engage in trade. When I have money, I can trade with anybody who is selling what I want to buy simply by giving them cash. If I don't have any cash, however, I can only trade with somebody who is both buying what I have to sell and is selling what I want to buy. On the market for sex and love, we are all buyers and we are all sellers. The distinction between these two markets, a market that depends on barter and a market that depends on currency, it may not seem important, but it goes a long way to explaining why it takes a long time for relationship markets to clear. It's not because the sellers, the women, are overpricing their services. It's just because barter economies are just horribly inefficient. If you want to engage in trade on a barter economy, you need to depend on a concept that economists call the double coincidence of wants. And the way the double coincidence of wants works is that if you can find somebody who is buying what you're selling and selling what you're buying, well, then that's just a huge coincidence. And what you're looking for is the love of your life, waiting for a coincidence, it can be a long and frustrating process. Let me give you an example from a specific market. There's a perception that if you're over the age of 40, then you're a woman and you're single, then you're on a market where you're particularly disadvantaged because men are in relatively short supply, which is somewhat inexplicable, and because women are overcharging for their services. The truth is, it's difficult for men and women on this market because on the market for people who are a little bit older, there are fewer players. And being able to satisfy that double coincidence of wants on a market when there's very few players, not only is it difficult, sometimes it's just impossible. Achieving market clearing, which is what the rest of you call falling in love, it may seem like there's a shortage on the other side of the market if you don't do that, but that's just an illusion that's been created by a market that doesn't have money to facilitate trade. So we don't have money on the market for sex and love, but we do have something else. On the market for sex and love, if you find yourself in a thin market where there's not a lot of buyers and sellers, so you're having a hard time engaging in trade, that's what the kids are calling it these days. Did you know that? You always have the option of lowering your expectations of what you're looking for in a mate. Now, I don't know if you ever watched Mad TV, but Mad TV used to have a skit that was a mock advertisement called Lowered Expectations. It was a dating agency. And this skit was first launched in 1995, and it started with this absolutely fabulous spiel. It went like this. Are you having trouble finding your ideal mate? How about any mate? Do you fear that you will be the last man or woman on earth still not getting any, and yet you still hope to land that prince or princess of your dreams? Well, wake up, sleeping ugly, because your only hope is lowered expectation. Our video library will introduce you to thousands of chronically rejected singles just as hard up and as pathetic as you. So good luck. You're going to need it. I always loved Lowered Expectations, not just because it was hilarious, it was, but because it actually kind of made sense, right? Put everybody together who's run out of options, give them a chance to meet each other. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but the same year that Lowered Expectations hit TV screens, another very real dating agency hit computer screens, Match.com. And the search for love and sex has never been the same since. It's not just online dating sites that have changed the market for sex and love. There's a study done by the Oxford Internet Institute that says among couples who met since 1997, who met online, just over a third of them actually met on a dedicated dating site. People are meeting in the variety of different places that the internet makes possible for them. Social networking sites, gaming sites, chat rooms. People are meeting by commenting on blogs. And if you have any doubt that the internet is affecting marriage, there's a study that's been done at McGill University by an economist there who shows that the increase in broadband lines into homes between having none in 1990 and having about 45 per household in 2006 was sufficient to increase the marriage rates of young women by between 10 and 12%. Access to the internet has gone a long way to solving the market problem that is created by the fact that we don't have money, because it brings very many buyers and sellers in together. And not only does it do that, it means that fewer people are forced to lower their expectations. I raise this point here because I think it goes a long way to explaining the importance of applying economic theory to look into relationships for markets for sex and love. And that's because when we apply economic theory to these markets, it helps us to understand how those markets have evolved over time, and just as importantly, how they're going to evolve into the future. Access to the internet has made it possible not only for people to not lower their expectations, it's actually encouraging people to raise their expectations. And if we care about the quality of relationships, if we care about the ability of marriage to stand the test of time, then we should care about how those relationships are forming. It's still a little bit early days, but there is evidence coming out that access to the internet is actually responsible for the decline in divorce rates that we've been seeing in the last decade. Okay, so there's one more question that I haven't answered, and that's the question, do you think this perspective is heartless and cold? I don't want an answer. I totally disagree with that, right? And just to prove my point, I have crafted a special set of economic wedding vows that I think you'll enjoy. Unfortunately, I only have time for the brides, but I'm going to share those with you. It's too bad those little violinists aren't here, because it would have been very sweet. And it goes like this. I, the bride, agree to the terms of this contract that will govern my marriage to you, the groom. While I accept that I have met many, many men whose qualities were such that they surpassed my minimum requirements for a man, the fact that they found me lacking has led me to choose you, my love, as my husband. What you lack in stature and attractiveness, you more than compensate for in terms of your education and income. And I vow that this trade-off is sufficient. I promise the children born into our marriage will be biologically your own, even as I know I will be tempted to have short-term relationships with men who possess a better genetic endowment. I will sacrifice my human capital for that of our children, in the knowledge that you will bring sufficient resources to our marriage. And while it may not be rational, I promise to invest in our marriage and our asset portfolio as if I really did believe that we'd be together until death do us part. It's beautiful, right? I always cry at weddings. I really just wanted to do stand-up instead of being an economist. You know, despite the complexity of the market for sex and love, the overwhelming majority of us will meet someone at some point in our lives that makes us want to say, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And what's even more remarkable about that, you'll have the opportunity to say it to someone who feels the same way. Love, triumphing over adversity. Isn't that what all great love stories are about? To me, the economics of sex and love, that's just the greatest love story of all time. You see, I threw some statistics in there for you.
Of course, everybody here wants to know, do you initiate your own romantic engagements?
Is that what everybody wants to know?
Oh, yeah, my BlackBerry is vibrating like crazy right here.
You can tweet me at, you know, I'm a busy woman.
Let's take that picture.
Oh, this is good.